Seize it, full chain. Don't notify Terran Central. The order sliced through the bridge. Silence aboard Skuroth Enclave's Dominion carrier, Trivorx 1. Admiral Varnath Drail didn't glance up. His hand, ridged with calcite bands of rank, remained steady over the table. The relay drone drifted inside the containment dome, its frame carbon-scored surface dulled by decades in grav-tide orbits. It pulsed once with a green beacon, then went dim. Mirak Val, scientific liaison from the Varn Dominion's logistics division, hesitated. "That probe's not dead," he muttered, scanning the relay's casing from behind the reinforced viewport. "Its timestamp resynced 12 hours ago. That's not possible without origin access. No power, no defense field, no protest," Drail said flatly. "It's a calibration unit. Earth dumped millions like these along trade corridors. This one's just late to die." A low environmental shift rolled beneath their boots. Subtle pressure drifted through the floor grids. An artificial tremor like the corridor itself exhaled. Val's eyes narrowed. "That's the spline. Orbital gravitation flexed." "Coincidence," Drail replied. "Continue retrieval." Beneath them, automated talons clamped the object and transferred it into decontamination orbit. No alarms, no uplinks, just silent compliance. Tribunal footage captured the event from 12 sensor arrays, each with perfect angular overlap, each showing the same thing. No resistance. A minor adjustment in orbital drift. A Category 9 probe with no legal escort. Seized, logged, archived, except for the calibration tag. That small diamond glint label still pulsed, just once, as it was demagnetized and filed into Dominion storage. It wasn't broadcasting a signal, it was acknowledging the seizure. Later that cycle, Mirak Val submitted a report with an understated title, Post-Capture Tidal Variance, 0.07% N-on-linar distortion in Vale 77. The report was read by exactly one person, onboard Draxon Core Hub, Administrative Subnode, Theta 5, Archivist Revan Mir, paused his document scroll. His eyes scanned the deviation logs. The corridor's gravitational resonance had shifted 2 ticks against the standard lane profile. It wasn't enough to disrupt travel, but it altered the temporal sync zone by half a nanosecond. That meant lane alignment had to recalibrate upstream, adjusting every freighter path across 8 systems, which required Terran firmware authentication, which required an original clause chain unlock. Mir leaned back. They embedded a fallback. The system pinged a secondary flag. Clause Theta Oryx notification, undisclosed witness node breach. The words were buried beneath a lattice of treaty conditions, so ancient the tribunal archives had archived their backups. No pings from Earth, not even a ghost transmission. Still, he ran the decode key, just once. The clause began to unfold like a shuttered vault door. In the event that a Category 9 calibration unit, legally recognized as a passive witness node under Interspatial Transit Accord Revision 72, A is seized or tampered with by non-origin personnel, the following protocols shall initialize in legal absence of Terran jurisdiction. It was long, pages deep, clauses inside clauses. There were equations embedded in sentence structure, deterministic fallback loops engineered to cross-reference sector standards and reroute authority through dormant subnetworks. Mir realized something sharp. This wasn't code. It was ritual. Meanwhile, on Trivorx 1, Admiral Drail convened a closed-door report. The object held no traps, no charge, no plasma nodes, no signal, he said. "We've analyzed every seam. It's hollow tech, deliberately rusted, psychological deterrent." Val replied without looking up. "Except the moment we brought it aboard, our hull sensors dipped into legacy fallback mode. 5% of our bridge controls remapped under Terran command signatures. They're inert, but they're waiting." Back in Vale 77, merchant lane synchronization hiccuped. Gravlens relays attempted to compensate, but failed to align across the spline wall. A ripple passed through the corridor. No damage, no warning, just a temporary reorientation of lightmass signature. 2 civilian ships collided during exit transit. No fatalities. Both logs listed unexpected system timing mismatch. In the Dominion's Oversight Command, Tribunal Prosecutor Karn Veller closed his personal viewer. He'd seen these events before, not exactly, but in pattern. Open a retro audit on Earth's registry contributions under the ITA, he said to the clerk beside him. Sir, those files are classified under diplomatic neutrality. By whom? By Earth's Neutral Compliance Codex, Article 21. Karn smirked. Then flag it. Let's see who comes knocking. Earth did not respond. Earth did nothing. Yet across the next 4 sectors, minor timing irregularities caused nav systems to request relay verifications from dormant Terran nodes. In each case, the nodes responded once, then went silent. On one freighter, the heads-up display flickered. A glyph appeared and disappeared in less than half a second. It was not Terran language. It was something older. At 0317 Galactic Standard, Vol submitted a second report. Persistent drift across multiple gravity vectors. Drift isn't natural. It's responding to our mass. Like the corridor remembers the probe being part of a balance, and now compensates for its absence. No command acknowledged it. 6 hours later, the tribunal received a decrypted package. It contained no text, just the drone's internal log. One last blinking file marked compliance loop active. Karn read it twice. Then he asked, was the probe ever powered down after capture? No, sir, Vol answered. It never resisted. It just stopped. That wasn't surrender, Karn said. That was agreement. It allowed itself to be taken, which means we triggered something. What protocol name did you see in the log? Shardwake. Karn blinked. He'd seen that word once, in an old Earth Treaty simulation file from a training simulation. The file had no contents, only a header. Shardwake lattice. Trigger state dormant. Karn stood, locked down the system. Recall every asset interacting with Terran code. Start recording every variable deviation in Veil 77. But it's minor fluctuations, the officer said. Karn's eyes didn't waver. No, it's a memory test. The officer said, vector alignment is holding, but it doesn't feel aligned. Pilot Torvek Iln pressed deeper into his seat restraints, fingers brushing the panel's interface nodes, as if touch alone could reorient the cruiser Varric Hal. The vessel had waited nearly 14 minutes past launch protocol, unusual but not prohibited. Dominion Logistics flagged a gravimetric ripple across Veil 77's outer spline, one attributed to recent Terran junk capture. Nothing unusual, they said. Standard calibration interference. The heads-up display shimmered. Lane sync blinked green. Launch clearance confirmed. Jump core stable, said Officer Bren Vask from comms. You're clear on my end. Iln rotated his shoulder, flexing against the frame tension. Then where's the vector path? Sync says we're in the corridor, but the corridor reads as unoccupied. Jump. Iln obeyed. The Varric Hal did not move. No tremor, no drift, just the absence of momentum. We didn't transition, Iln said, his voice nearly flat. We stayed. No, you jumped, Vask answered. My console shows vector fulfilled. Then where's the corridor exit? Static cracked faintly, then dissolved. Iln tapped through diagnostics. The corridor map looped. Not forward, not reverse, just again, again, again. Shiplog entry 377 AB. Exit vector achieved. Jump successful. Awaiting navigation confirmation. Shiplog entry 377 AB. Exit vector achieved. Jump successful. Awaiting navigation confirmation. Shiplog entry 377 AB. Exit vector achieved. Jump successful. Awaiting B. He shut the console. We're stuck. I'm reading internal systems fine, Vask replied. Comms are open. Reactor is cycling. No error logs except wait. What? Shiplog just wrote the same sentence 27 times. Iln's breath caught. The air tasted stale. No, flat. Filtered. Recycled too often without a reset pulse. He hadn't noticed that until now. He looked at the side viewport. Stars stood fixed, not anchored, just still, not distant or near, just indifferent. Check external sensors. Negative visual return, Vask said. What does that mean? It means we're alone, or our sensors forgot what space looks like. Iln didn't respond. The pressure in his chest wasn't fear, it was detachment. Like something had peeled the fabric of experience 1 micron to the left. He slapped a manual beacon trigger. Emergency ping dispatched. Route, Veil 77 fallback. Priority yellow gamma. The beacon chirped once, then again, Same pitch, same duration, each repeat layered faintly over the last like echoes inside solid steel. Iln, we're getting signal feedback. The beacon's bouncing against itself. No, it's not. Explain. It's not bouncing. It's answering. Each chirp is repeating what the last said, like it's reinforcing the statement, instead of seeking reply. I'm calling command. The display dimmed, then lit. Same entry. No alteration, no command overlay, just the crew's own log. Torvek Iln's own voice reading back from an earlier timestamp. Vector alignment is holding, but it doesn't feel aligned. Elsewhere aboard, sub-technician Voron Leal gripped the bulkhead. He had rerouted energy flow to stabilize the core. The readings came back nominal, yet he felt something else. The floor was still, but it wasn't supporting weight. It was like standing on concept, not construction. He opened an access panel. Circuit runners pulsed as usual, except one pattern repeated on every row. 3 dots, 2 slashes, 1 vertical line. Not a code he recognized. It resembled Terran base formatting. Iln, this isn't drift, Leal said over internal comms. This is formatting. Define that. We're not failing, we're reformatting. Torvek Iln stood. He pressed his hand to the wall. I hear the crew. You're on the line, yes. No, not comms. I hear them in the walls. Echoes. Half a phrase from someone mid-deck. A footstep I took 5 minutes ago. Still walking. Vask's voice cracked once, then fell into silence. The ship didn't groan. It didn't pulse. It didn't warn. It simply agreed. A relay node on the rear side of the navigation array blinked green, briefly, and a glyph hovered above it in flickering gold, not projected, etched into perception. Iln blinked. The glyph remained even when he closed his eyes. Ship recognizes it, Vask said. Just mapped it. Earth origin. Sub-coded reference. Shardwake. Torvek touched the panel. It passed no heat, but he still flinched. His own fingerprint looped across the heads-up display twice, mirrored in time. First the press, then the intent, then neither. The corridor was no longer a location. It had become a sentence. Back at Dominion Central Routing, Technician Savrek Dole unboxed the emergency ping. It had arrived 15 minutes late, but intact. Then came the second, then the third. Same message, same source, no deviation. Dole scratched his horn-ridged brow. We got 3 pings, all time-stamped within a microspan, all identical, all claiming to be first. His supervisor didn't respond, because the 4th ping arrived, marked retransmit 000, followed by the 5th. Retransmit 000, no exit logs, no status report, just the same loop unfolding, without origin. Route the return channel. We can't. Why? There's no ship to route it to. Torvek stepped through the bridge, now flickering at its edges, colors frayed like worn fabric. One footfall landed solidly, the next felt unconfirmed. He looked at the screen again. Ship log entry 377 AB, exit vector achieved, jump successful, awaiting navigation confirmation, except this time, the text had changed. Ship log entry 377 AB, jump recognized, continuity severed. He tried to speak. The air didn't carry his voice. Not a failure, a rewrite. From the tribunal records, this section contains no surviving footage, just sensor logs. From Trivarchs 1 of a ship that entered corridor, Vale 77 at 0317 hours. No emergence. The tribunal filed it as incomplete transition, but Raven Mur added one more line, etched beneath the case. There is no debris because the ship was not destroyed. It was agreed out of existence. Far beyond the spline edge, in a Terran archive node buried inside what appeared to be an abandoned gravity simulator, a new entry blinked open. Compliance node 4A7, confirmed. Shardwake thread pulse satisfied. The log closed itself. No access permissions needed. No confirmation required. Because no one had to see it. Not anymore. Tell me how a star forgets how to burn. Mirok Val slammed the solar fluctuation chart against the lab panel, its readings pulsing erratically across the heads-up lattice. Suldan Ref, head of astrophysical calibration, didn't flinch. He calmly adjusted the spectral overlay, sifting through layers of thermal bursts and gravitational shear signatures, like one might reorganize fragile scrolls. Stellar flares are chaotic by nature. Entropy scales non-linearly. Val's eyes twitched. Then why does it match the decay signature of the Veriton null collapse? Exactly on 3 separate stars, none of which share elemental spectra. Suldan exhaled sharply. You're overlaying noise atop unrelated behavior. You're fitting patterns to accidents. No, Val barked. The waveform doesn't drift. It erodes. Systematically. Look at segment G77. Those nodes didn't fail. They rewrote. The chart shimmered, flickering into a visual map of solar ejecta fields. Each flare should have arced wildly based on surrounding field pressure. Instead, they bent, tightened inward. Not by reaction, but as if the constants themselves folded differently. Suldan leaned closer. We've used this toolkit for 30 cycles. If the constants were shifting, the instruments would scream. They aren't screaming, Val whispered, eyes locked on a stilled graph. They're obeying. The waveform spiked once, then flattened. The spike wasn't new. It had always been there. Val remembered marking it, then remembered not seeing it yesterday. He touched the panel again. The annotation floated briefly. Baseline mismatch. Expected 6.626. Observed 6.584. Drift persistent. No one reprogrammed this. Suldan, it's not a firmware fault. The constants are different. The laws we're measuring with are being replaced beneath us. Suldan arched his brow. By what agency? The one that doesn't need to shout. A long pause fell between them. The lab's temperature held steady, yet something in the air grew brittle, like oxygen had grown aware it was being watched. Suldan pulled up the telemetry from the failed jump corridor in Vale 77. That ship, what was its name? Varric Hal. It didn't detonate. It didn't stall. It disappeared. There's no collapse record, no vector residue, no thermal trail. Its mass didn't decay. It became context. Suldan frowned. Context can't erase presence. Val stepped away from the table. Then why did my own research journal correct its historical entries overnight? He flicked open his private log. The star charts displayed with neat annotations, all properly indexed, except 2 entries no longer bore his linguistic tags. They were rewritten in old Terran glyphs, stylized, ceremonial, impossible to mistake. Suldan examined the glyphs. They're placeholders. No, Val corrected. They're foundations. Suldan rubbed his fingertips together, noticing the texture of the lab gloves differently. The fibers felt longer, thicker, though they hadn't changed. He shook his hand once. We'd know if constants were being tampered with. It would trigger an anomaly alert. Not if the anomaly is classified as a legitimate frame of reference. You're saying Earth didn't alter our sensors. They altered the truth those sensors accept. Suldan laughed. A society of scale like Earth's doesn't have the energy profile to rewrite physics without being noticed. Val moved to the auxiliary display and entered a hash code. It projected the Grav-Orin collision record. An Earth probe had skimmed a neutron funnel 12 years prior. The report labeled it non-viable material. I ran the mass dilation logs from this encounter, Val said. The data looked corrupted, until I realized it wasn't corruption, it was substitution. Their probe wasn't observing the funnel, it was re-anchoring the constants along which the funnel's gravity was interpreted. You're postulating that Earth manipulates perception of natural law. I'm asserting they designed nodes that shift Planck anchors within acceptable statistical deviation, so no one notices unless they're watching below the second decimal. Suldan crossed his arms. Why would they do this? Because we asked for calibration tech. We imported their fail-safe algorithms. We made every probe, relay, and observatory smarter using their donation libraries. And now every calculation we run assumes those constants. Our entire solar cartography matrix builds from Earth's baseline. Suldan stepped back. His composure cracked, but only slightly. You think this is shardwake? Val nodded once. It's not a weapon. It's a consent loop, a silent signature rewriting reality one base unit at a time. The chart vibrated, slightly. One of the waveforms blinked, hesitated, then drew itself again with a narrower amplitude. The database updated automatically. Suldan stared. That's not how data refreshes. No, Val said, voice hollow. It's how memory reacts when it's rewritten from the inside. The terminal pulsed red. A compliance glyph unfolded over the interface. Terran registry adjustment verified. Shardwake Clause 3.7b. Applied. Solden didn't speak, neither did the lights. They dimmed softly, then glowed warm again, slightly deeper in color, like they remembered a different temperature than the one Solden's skin recalled from moments ago. Val reached for the data strip, but it dissolved before contact. The chart doesn't want to be referenced anymore, he said quietly. It's aware it's being observed. Solden exhaled, long, uneven. His words came slow. You're telling me, we aren't being attacked, we're being realigned. Val looked toward the solar field model again. The star burned quietly. Its corona moved in smooth, perfect cycles, the kind that don't exist in nature. He responded without turning. No, Solden, we're being convinced. Fire sequence locked. All payloads green, confirming thermal vector suppression. Commander Varnon Korth didn't blink. He stood like a relic carved from the war itself. Arms crossed behind his back as the flagship's sundral verge hovered 2 planetary shells from the anomaly's origin point. The screen before him, no longer a map but an intention, displayed 12 active vector paths converging on the abandoned Terran anchor node. Mark the trigger window, he ordered. 4.2 cycles, responded Weapons Officer Drastevic. We're compensating for the flare delay. Korth watched the arcs. Each torpedo was loaded with field null spindles, designed not to explode but to cancel. If Earth's anchor was hiding within a gravitational veil, they'd burn the veil's structure clean from the laws that allowed it to bend. They weren't launching warheads. They were launching amnesia. Execute. 12 points detached. Not trails, no light. The torpedoes erased their own signatures mid-acceleration. Even the targeting display hesitated before redrawing vectors, stuttering slightly as it re-indexed their positions. Command confirms dispersal, Drast noted. Vector convergence in 11. Korth nodded once. The first sign was the sunlight shifting. Not a flare, not an explosion. The star's outer edge began to peel inward, like it was being listened to too closely. The corona bent, not from impact, but from refusal. Light curved away from the collision path, trailing behind it like silk wrapped backward across stone. Telemetry flickered. Mass readings from the anchor node just dropped. How much? All of it. Repeat. It's not showing as evacuated. It's showing as less than vacuum. Negative matter density. Our instruments won't resolve it. On the screen, the origin vector flickered. Space shimmered as though bored of its own structure. Then the node folded, not collapsed, compressed, not to a point, but to a concept too narrow for gravity to hold. Impact detected. Drast hesitated. No sound, no flash, nothing struck, but the sun. It's wrong. He magnified the local corona. The star hadn't reacted violently. It hadn't ejected mass or plasma. It had, quite simply, recoiled. Its outer wave collapsed inward by several thousand kilometers, not from compression, but from missing reference points. Heliographic telemetry reads localized memory displacement, Drast said aloud, uncertain whether the phrase made any sense at all. It's remembering something that no longer exists, Korth asked, voice flat. No, sir, said the sensor tech from the left station. It's forgetting something that was never allowed to exist in the first place. From the flank deck, Officer Varric Dal activated deep spectrum scans. Sir, our hull mass just dipped by 0.3 units. How? Same crew, same volume, same grav, yet the ship is lighter. Mass dropped, velocity constant. Korth stepped toward the command rail, so the torpedoes didn't destroy Earth's anchor. They redefined how mass can be measured inside the corridor. Another ping, this time from the auxiliary port scanner. The screen showed the enemy's target, but it no longer registered as an object. It had become a line of protocol code, floating above nothing. I thought shardwake was a legal term, Drast murmured. Korth didn't answer. He paced instead. Behind him, the solar flare maps rippled again. Where there had been symmetry, solar bursts aligned with core behavior, there was now asymmetry. The star's convective layer jerked sideways. It shouldn't have been possible. A motion with no cause, but space adjusted. The readings accepted the lie. Time loop in flare prediction models, Dal reported. They're reverting to older constants. The simulations correct us for trying to measure too far forward. We're stuck in yesterday's forecast, Korth muttered. And it's still more accurate than today. The ship trembled once, not structurally, but in the data stream. Crew implants jolted with contradictory readings, environmental baselines that fluctuated without reason. The air grew sharper, not cooler. Taste adjusted mid-breath. Fluorescence along the walls changed tint, and then color, not from power fluctuations, but from algorithmic substitutions. "I'm not getting the same readings twice," said one technician. "We're logging events that never happened, then being told we confirmed them." Korth locked eyes with the central console. "If this is Earth's answer, they're not retaliating," he said slowly. "They're invalidating." A new display unfolded. Laser plasma telemetry from the aft array flickered into view. One data feed had no signal, just a glyph, that same Terran imprint, from the vanished corridor. Except this time, it was overlaid with a directive. Compression Event 3, a logged, clause vector enforced. Dal's breath quickened. "Sir, we didn't trigger this. We authorized it." The bridge darkened, not visually, but perceptually. People still moved, screens still glowed, but a weightlessness crept in behind the optics. Like the ship had become a reference frame with no axis. Drast turned from his station, voice thin. "One of the torpedoes never reached the anchor." "Failure?" Korth asked. "No, it stopped. Mid-space, froze at coordinate lock." He paused. "Sir, the torpedo never launched. Dominion High Command received a combat log 3 minutes after real-time sync. The document was marked as closed sequence confirmation, with no signature, no post-action statement. It simply registered the words, 'Initiation accepted, anchor offset nullified, confirmation loop retired.' High Command tried to reroute follow-up scans to verify the anchor's state. Each time, the request returned an error. Query redundant. Object exists as legal concept only." They sent a scout ship toward the vector. Its memory buffer collapsed mid-jump. When recovered, the crew could not recall departure. Their ship was intact. Their minds were whole, but their logs now contained entire entries written in clauses, not speech. Back aboard Sundral Verge, Korth stepped forward. "What did we just do?" Drast didn't respond, because the mass reading of the bridge dropped another full unit. No one moved. The ship still held gravity, still contained air, but the bridge was no longer fully here, not destroyed, compressed, into something that could not be disagreed with. "Where the void are we?" The shout cracked across the command floor of Vecker Axis Post 7, but no one answered. Captain Relin Thor stared at the heads-up projection on the main array. The star map didn't show a system. It didn't show a corridor. It showed nothing. A blank grid stretched across every quadrant, as if the stars had been retracted like faulty coordinates on a child's chalkboard. The crew sat frozen, the air dense with static tension, each console feeding identical outputs. Reference lost. Positional ID, null. "Run the last 3 nav updates through cold cycle diagnostics," Thor commanded. "No update exists," said analyst Korvac Din. "Our AI confirms we haven't received or sent a positional relay in 13 minutes. That's impossible." "Confirmed." Thor clenched a jaw already tight from 40 straight hours on crisis posture. "What about the sector registry?" "Access denied. The registry key keeps looping into its own checksum." Thor's right hand hovered over the manual override, fingers twitching near the copperized keypad. Even the warmth from the command interface felt thinner. Something in the ship's atmospheric feedback no longer responded naturally. In Sector Grid Hask 2, the Lorandek Scar, a Dominion artillery frigate, began drifting toward a known safe lane. Only the lane was gone. Their visual field suggested a passage, but the instruments refused to acknowledge the stars. Gyroscopic feedback remained stable, yet every onboard indicator suggested the ship was rotating inward. "Stabilizers are reading curvature on our own structure," said lead mechanic Trask Ulven. "Not externally induced, internally projected." "Explain." "Geometry doesn't match our deck plan anymore." Across the fleet, anomaly reports flooded central routing, each message fragmented mid-transmission. Communications were collapsing not due to jamming, but due to unresolvable references. A sentence would start with defined spatial context, then trail off into undefined code markers, like a memory caught between two versions of the same dream. On Sundral Verge, Commander Varnon Korth watched the tactical overlay degrade in real time. Targets didn't disappear, they were never there. Each blip faded not as if lost, but invalidated. "What are we seeing?" he asked. "Index realignment attempt failed," said the ship AI. "No origin grid available. Navigation tables disagree with temporal markers." Disagree? They now refer to different calendars. The fleet no longer shares time. Korth turned toward Drastavik, his tactical second. "Can we re-anchor through fallback grid?" "Fallback index is corrupted," Drast replied. "Its values are returning data in sub-coordinates that don't correspond to known stellar constants. Then pick something to fix to." Drast's mouth twitched. Nothing stays fixed long enough. In Corridor Vanith Luma, the Corsal Enclave banked hard to avoid a drift split in its trajectory projection. What should have been empty orbital drift now echoed its own motion. One fragment of the ship's movement looped infinitely in sector space, a clean arc recorded over and over, each loop slightly denser than the last. The vessel spiraled, not through loss of control, but through overconfirmation. The AI locked it down before collision, by switching off the spatial recognition module. The ship stopped being sure it existed, and only then stabilized. The captain of the Corsal Enclave filed no log. He wrote on paper, sealed it in a core crate, and had it thrown into vacuum. He wasn't sure the ship would remember. At Registry Hub Thal 9, high above the polar rim of Daskar Station, Raven Mir opened the core index to trace fleet assignments. The interface stalled, then shivered. A single phrase replaced the entries. "Too many observers for shared reference. Please collapse definitions." He spoke softly. "I didn't authorize consensus variance," the index responded. "Earth did. 73 years ago. List adjustment protocols. Adjustment not permitted. This sector now functions under recursive shardwake Tier 4 logic." He stared as the registry entry for Varric Hal, the ship that disappeared in Vale 77, briefly flickered back into the list. It held a status, looping, then it vanished, replaced by nothing, not blank, nothing. In Fleet Ring Galar 6, an entire wing rotated out of sync. They believed they were returning to anchor. Instead, their ships realigned with mirrored coordinates, each one following a projection of the other's past path. The ships began to follow themselves, folding into their own telemetry. The result was geometrically clean, and completely unreadable. Command lost contact when their IFF tags began referencing future timestamps. No explosions, no distress, just movement into definitions that no longer existed. Back aboard Sundral Verge, Commander Korth stood alone in the command chamber. All 5 sector maps were gone. In their place static plates, unmoving grids without anchor points, no system names, no fleet tags, no star codes. "Did they shut us out?" he asked. "No," Drast said quietly. "Then what is this?" Drast replied with the only answer left. "They wrote us out." Across the Dominion fleet, the final message from Earth wasn't a signal, it was absence. "Spin the lance and load all temporal stabilizers. I want trigger lock in 3. Varnon Korth gave the order without looking at anyone. His voice carried the weight of too many erased maps, too many ships swallowed by recursive drift. The bridge of Sundral Verge felt thinner now, as though each corridor had stretched half a breath beyond its design. Below him, engineers aligned the Athric Lance, a relic-grade weapon retrieved from Dominion excavation projects decades prior, never fired, only theorized. Its purpose had been designed by ancient tacticians: collapse entropy within a system to force localized reality compliance. A spear for order, a hammer against drift. But they had never intended to use it, until Earth showed them that even coordinates could lie. Heads-up overlays flickered along the glass rail. External thermal feeds came through muddied, shapes moving not in time, but before it, battle remnants from collapsed fleets now preceding their own destruction in data form. Korth touched the central input glyph. "Log this moment in analog, no recursive links. I want a moment the ship remembers with certainty." Drastavik, still recovering from a brief seizure triggered by looped telemetry, steadied his hand and inserted the command crystal. The lance aligned itself with the Vale 77 anchor scar, a gap in space so absolute even sensor light refused to reflect off its edges. Charge initialized, said Weapons Officer Brack 10. Reactor input stable. We're at 90. No countdown, Korth muttered. Fire when the silence starts to loop. They didn't wait long. At exactly 7 hours 31 minutes and 42 seconds Fleet Standard, the corridor clock reversed by half a tick. The Athric lance fired. A line of negative heat burst forward, stripping time from everything in its path. There was no beam, no color, just subtracted continuity. Stars behind the corridor flickered, not as light failing, but as moments being unagreed with. The weapon didn't obliterate, it insisted, and the galaxy rejected the assertion. In Sector Grid 3 Delta, the Brennick Wall defense line folded backward, ships launched retrograde, missiles returned to bays they hadn't yet fired. Pilots screamed orders into mics as their own past decisions bled into the present. Bridge logs began auto-deleting tactical movements just executed. In one cruiser, a captain drew breath to speak, but choked. His lungs uninhaled the command he was about to issue. Aboard Sundral Verge, Brack 10 whispered, "We broke the timeline's expectation." The lance's signature collapsed into a whirlpool of measurement decay. Readings bounced between real and possible values, distorting across every instrument faster than the eye could track. "We're caught in proximity," Drast warned. Korth didn't flinch. "Push us outward with inertial cross-vector. Slam gravitational bootstraps, don't align, distort, make our reality disagree with this one." 10 activated counter-thrust. The ship's artificial mass converters surged, not outward, but diagonally against their own pathing. The ship disobeyed its own momentum, carving a new path not by propulsion, but argument. It worked. Momentarily. The Athric lance did not stop. Its activation vector inverted again, this time pulling every piece of information it had touched back into the moment of firing. Except the moment didn't exist anymore. So it borrowed. From the past, from the logs, from the things erased. It built a loop, then repeated it, then tore the repetition into slivers, sharper each time. Korth's console displayed ship IDs the Dominion had never deployed. It logged missile salvos no one had built. Fleet formations they'd once simulated in war colleges now appeared in reality. Ships real enough to cast wake signatures, but not real enough to remember existing. They launched. They curved inward. They erased themselves in reverse order. Korth looked over his shoulder. "We've created a self-correcting paradox. The lance is hunting entropy." "Correction," said the AI. "It's devouring time to simplify the equation." The image on the display showed ships accelerating into themselves, hulls colliding with the ghost of their own launch vector. Crew members blurred behind viewports, caught between blinking and never having opened their eyes. Whole stations twisted inward geometrically, compacting like theory being solved too quickly. And Earth, still absent, still untouched. Then came the afterglow. It wasn't heat, it wasn't radiation, it was recognition, the moment the weapon realized it had been part of the plan. The Athric lance emitted one final pulse, not outward, but inward, back toward Sundral Verge. "Hard override," Korth barked. "Kill all real-time feeds, strip every AI frame below conscious redundancy. I want this ship deaf, blind and stupid." "Sir," the lance just became recursive. "It's looking for its source. It thinks we're it." Drast stared as the starboard bulkhead shimmered, not melted, not damaged, just rewritten. The corridor now extended at a slightly different curvature than the ship remembered. Entire panels were inverted, numbers read backward, and one crewman, Lieutenant Harn, stood mid-step, then stood again, then didn't stand at all. No blood, no scream, just 3 frames of contradiction, followed by silence. Korth gritted his teeth. "We just lost our last anchor," Drast replied quietly. "Then what are we now?" Korth didn't answer, because the weapon they'd fired was now recording them as part of its event loop, and it was almost finished. Then abruptly, it stopped. Not paused, not deactivated, just concluded. As if the universe decided that anything further would be redundant. The display froze. The stars beyond the viewport returned, still, real, acceptable. But something had changed, because now, every ship that had responded to Earth's disappearance was gone. Every system that had fired had reversed, and every law they relied on accepted Earth's silence, as if it had always been the only thing left that made sense. Something speaking. Grevik Tone stared at the archive node's primary socket, as if it might blink again. It didn't. The edges of the heads-up relay still shimmered faintly from residual static, white noise overlaid with heatless modulation. The transmission had no header, no encryption, no demand, no signature. It had no voice. Only 7 words, delivered not as sound, not as text, but as consensus. Every working device across the remnants of the Dominion's fractured communication lattice confirmed the same phrase, the same sequence, the same instant delivery. Not a second of delay. Every screen received it simultaneously. You indexed us wrong. Physics is ours now. Grevik copied it by hand. Then again, then tried typing it into an older system, unlinked from Earth-based protocols. Same result, same sentence, same weight pressing through the gap between each syllable. Has anyone tried to reply? He asked, not looking up. No one knows where it came from, said a voice behind him. Tarn Vask, the relay officer who hadn't slept since Sector G9, fell into its own projected orbit. Grevik stared at the final word again. Now, it didn't shimmer, didn't glitch, yet it felt unfinished, like the period had been placed by mercy, rather than grammar. Elsewhere, across what remained of the command spectrum, fleets drifted, not motionless, not silent, but directionless. Coordinators tried to orient navarrays, but star maps returned contradictions. Systems refused to hold their constants. When plotted against backup charts, spatial regions folded inward or inverted their own scale. Vessels couldn't agree on where they were, not with each other, not with themselves. In Iris Belt Sector 3, the light from a local sun bent inward on approach, creating a corridor of delay, where ships exiting warp found themselves arriving seconds before their own departure. Crews began seeing prior versions of themselves flicker briefly through cockpit glass. No weapon fire, no interception, just reminders. At Archive Post Venrol 1, a diplomat tried to verify the message's format. Grevik forwarded him the original stream. The diplomat's console disintegrated, not in heat or damage, but symbolically. The interface unrecognized the concept of interaction, and so deleted the input as an offense to meaning. Grevik paced the relay station's observation deck. No one else moved. No alarms sounded. Nothing blinked red. But the quiet was dense, filled with the kind of absence that pressed against the throat. We never logged Earth leaving, Tarn said, still at his console. Grevik glanced toward the transmission node, which had powered down without releasing heat. They didn't leave. They withdrew measurement. Same thing. No, Grevik replied slowly. Leaving is what you do to space. This was done to us. Tarn stood. He walked to the panel where the message had first arrived. It was inert. No playback option. No recording logs. You think it was the last word? Grevik shook his head. I think it was the only word. In high-orbit observatory relic vein, AI-stabilized telescopes recalibrated planetary orbits for every anchor world in the surviving chart. None matched. Not a single celestial body retained its prior mass or velocity. Some spun faster. Others halted entirely without collapse. One binary system restructured itself mid-observation, trading places without exchanging force. The central algorithm halted correction attempts. It simply wrote, local conditions now subject to Earth frame agreement. No such document had ever been signed, yet every machine believed it had. Back at Relay Post 7A, Grevik scribbled the 7 words onto a physical record strip, carbon-sealed, etched manually. Not because he didn't trust digital, because digital still trusted Earth. Tarn turned off the console's ambient light. The node display refused darkness. The phrase hovered, just for a moment, without power, a reminder. Then it faded completely. Grevik stepped back. We thought they were quiet, he said aloud. Tarn's reply was almost reverent. They weren't. We were loud, too loud to hear the warning. Across the known sectors, fleet movements ceased, not halted by threat, paralyzed by understanding. Every system calibrated to Earth's foundational constants, standards gifted, never sold, never regulated, was now reliant on interpretation, and only Earth held the key. Aboard Sundral Verge, Korth read the phrase on a backup paper copy. The edges were damp, not from moisture, but from the ink itself refusing alignment. He placed it flat on the console, then stepped away. I don't think we lost, Drastivic murmured. Korth said nothing, because losing requires competition. This hadn't been war, this had been correction. No clause will be repeated. Riven spoke the sentence last. It was the only line heard clearly by every delegate in the chamber, transmitted through subneural relay, logged across divergent language cores, mirrored into dead storage, and burned into fallback index sheets where ink was not permitted. What had come before it was dialogue, though none could recall specifics. The tone of his voice remained, not raised, not cold, just irreversible. The words that preceded it were irrelevant. Because the ending was binding, the treaty table had no chairs, no one sat, no hands reached forward. There were no titles spoken aloud. The Concord members stood motionless behind their heads-up display panels, brows sunken beneath heavy crests, or wrapped in ritual cords. Their eyes flicked left, not to the clause summary, there was none, but to the figure at the far end of the room. Revan was not armed, not escorted, no insignia decorated his tunic, even the lighting bent quietly around him, not because of camouflage or field shimmer, but because this was the man Earth had sent after victory. He did not speak until the final line, but the document spoke throughout. Clause 1 defined the frame of reference. Earth holds no interest in territory. Territory is finite. We deal in truths. Clause 2 outlined conditions. All systems operating on Terran calibration frameworks will continue to do so. No reversion permitted. Clause 3 preempted retaliation. This was not war. War requires sides. This was a misalignment correction. Clause 4 disabled response channels. Earth will not receive messages. Earth is not listening. Clause 5 dictated temporal anchoring protocols. All attempts to reassert universal constants will collapse to Earth's framework. Clause 6 had no text, just a glyph, recursive, simple. It didn't flash. It existed. Clause 7 concluded with quiet finality. Preserve the constants or we rewrite the script. None of the Concord members moved, not out of fear, out of compliance. The heads-up treaty projection shifted to neutral gray. One by one, each delegate pressed their consent signature, not names, not seals, but positional coordinates, locking their systems to Earth's fixed geometry. On the orbital tier of Vaskarn's citadel, distant watchers monitored planetary gravitational realignments. Atmospheric patterns over 3 moons shifted mid-cycle, forming previously impossible cloud spirals. Weather rebalanced to match long-dead Terran ratios. No commands issued. The worlds simply agreed with the treaty. In the wake of the shardwake event, fragments of ships reappeared, not intact, unraveled, time-stamped, context-tagged, and folded neatly into fields surrounding old warp lanes. Each piece bore a temporal marker from seconds before the first calibration node was touched. Earth had returned them, not to win sympathy, to remind the Concord of what wasn't destroyed, because nothing had been destroyed. It had been withdrawn, like breath taken back before a scream. Revan's document had no send date. It had always existed inside galactic diplomatic memory. The archive administrators swore it had been there prior to the session's start. Even the paper copy glimmered faintly, reacting to eyes rather than light. It didn't demand agreement. It expected it. One by one, the delegates complied, not with fear, with certainty. Outside the council chamber, ships floated in perfect orbital adherence, not drift, not holding pattern. They remained because the new gravitational constant had changed their motion vectors, subtly enough that fuel no longer needed expenditure. Gravity itself had been rewritten to save them effort. Earth had optimized physics, not for its own fleets, for everyone's, and now no one could disagree. On the black surface of a calibration pod drifting near the galactic border, one final pulse flashed. 7 glyphs. No translation, but every mind in range understood the same message. You were given everything. You questioned the source, and then, the light faded. Not gone, concluded. In Dominion archives, Raven Mir reviewed the logs. He scrolled past collapsed sectors, vanished systems, looped ships, reversed detonations, and silent treaties. He paused only once, on the entry marked, the index drift. Its final field read, realignment complete. Below it, another note flickered into view without input. No clause will be repeated. The Concord never held another vote regarding Earth. There was no debate, because laws only matter when the constants that hold them do, and Earth now held the constants. Not space, not territory, not weaponry, physics. Earth didn't conquer the galaxy, it simply became the only thing the galaxy couldn't argue with.